Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd, ayyal ahbab. This is an addressing of the comment by Brother Toolate. And he said, I've come associate, some English mistakes, I've come to associate the Salafis with gangs and intimidation. It all started with students in the 80s and 90s. Using your example, you believed you understood more than the brother whom graduated and was confirmed by his teachers. How arrogant are you to take such a position? Rawr. Okay, Brother Toolate, may Allah forgive us and you and guide us and you and rectify our condition and affairs and bless us with ilm nafi, rizqan tayyib wa amalan mutaqabbilan. May Allah put this on our scale of good deeds, not our scale of bad deeds. Brother Toolate, I think your comment's too late. And I think your comment is misguided, and I'm going to tell you why. So first and foremost, you've come to associate Salafis with gangs and intimidation. Okay, I haven't had any Salafis intimidate me or gang rough me up or what have you, but I do get the gist of what you're saying. You're probably in America and you've probably had some negative experiences, perhaps in the 80s and 90s. You're generally talking about in the East Coast, could be New York, New Jersey, Philly, those kind of places. And we know the history. We don't need to go into the history and what sometimes takes place with some Salafis. You need to be fair and honest, Mr. Toolate, because your comment is too late, and I'm going to tell you why. Because, matter of fact, your comment isn't even too late. It hasn't even begun. It's wrong. And the reason I'm saying that is because of your limited association, honestly. Because I don't know if you've met Fozan. He was never intimidating. I don't know if you met Sheikh Ibrahim Raheli. Never. He's very gentle. Or Sheikh Suleiman Raheli. Very gentle. Salafis. Imam Muqbil, who was very stern against Ahl Bidah. He was not a gangster. He was humble, and you should see the way people would stand and rise out of respect for this imam. Shaking his hand, you felt the shyness yourself. He wasn't a gangster. Even the one who took over, Sheikh Yahya al-Hujuri, was not a gangster, okay? Regardless of whatever issues transpired, but Sheikh Abdullah Murray, Sheikh Abdullah Adani, those are just a few in Yemen. Sheikh Uthman al-Damari, so many I've met some of the most humble human beings I've ever met. And they were Salafi imams. My Sheikh Saeed and Hail. We could go on and on and on, and that's not our intent here. But I do want to mention that, your sample size is a bit small. Because if you're talking about, maybe you're talking about the UK, maybe you're talking about America, or both UK and America in your experience. But again, those sample sizes are way too small because they don't represent Salafiyah. They are just a microcosm and a microsample of people trying to practice and understand Salafiyah. Now, in the 80s and 90s, people who were trying to practice in the West were generally influenced by particular individuals and organizations and so forth. And there was... And most of these were people who were, students of knowledge, who yusibu yukhti, make things correct, get things correct, and make mistakes. And there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of mistakes, plain and simple, from, many of us, because we just didn't know. We're just learning, and we're trying to bring the dawah to America, even though I'm sure there was people already calling to the dawah in America and other places, but just not on this level, not on this scale. And not probably emphasizing the name Salafi or Salafiyah. So that's one thing. Secondly, again, you're discounting the whole tradition in Islam. This is not something that began with Sheikh Muhammad ibn Wahhab. It didn't begin with Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah or Sheikh al-Islam ibn al-Qayyim. We can go back. It's a tradition. It's a tradition of, and it's a methodology of who? Of the understanding of the Sahaba to Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam radiyallahu ta'ala. And that's why the scholars, they mention that the heads of the Salaf is the Sahaba to Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ru'us Salaf Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala majma'in. So the dawah to Salafiyah is something which is attributing to that call, and it's a synod, it's a chain going all the way back. And there were many great imams, and even if someone's a great imam, that doesn't mean we blindly follow and we take everything he says. There are many great imams who made mistakes in Aqidah, and no one from the people of the Sunnah disregarded them, but rather they talked about, for example, Imam Ibn Khuzaymah, akhta fi mas'ala. They talked about in this regard. So there's a tradition, and there are great imams that we love and respect and take knowledge from in most areas, but they were known for mistakes in Aqidah that might have had the leanings of being from Ahl Kalam, or taking some of the positions as far as the Sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that's outside of the scope. The point is I think your sample size is very small. And again, you should be looking at knowledge. What is the path forward? Is the path forward is it Ashari school of thought? I don't know what you follow. Are you Maturidi? Are you not nation, but maybe following the way of Imam Warithdin or whoever? I don't know what your ideological tradition is and orientation. But again, you should always look. I'll just leave you with this. Imam Malik said, rahmatullahi alayhi, rahmatan wasiya, he said, La yuraf al-haq bi rijal, lakin yuraf al-rijal bil-haq. We don't know the truth by men, but rather we know the men by the truth. So you should always, whoever you're listening to, wherever you're taking your knowledge, you should put it on that scale. Now, the last point you mentioned, you said about somebody who graduated, was confirmed by his teachers. How arrogant are you to take such a position? I don't know what position that I took, so it would have been nice if you'd have mentioned the name of a person. I said 3 reasons some Salafi dies. The only person I mentioned by name there was Yasser Qadi. Yes, he has studied, and I've mentioned that many times. He was studied, and I believe I met him in Medina once or twice because I know some of his companions, and I met them it was in my neighborhood. Anyway, ala kulli hal, he has studied. His Arabic is very strong. He's written books. I have his master's thesis, excellent book, 2 volumes about Jahm ibn Safwan, refuting Ahl Bid'ah and detailing, going into depth. It's a piece of research. He got his master's with that. So the man is well versed and studied in Islam in general, and also in in secular knowledge. He's a very articulate, well-educated individual from Ahl Bid'ah. I mean, don't get twisted. Don't get upset. I mean, just look at the man's statements. So it's not about how much you studied, who you studied with, you graduated from here. Those are all things that are beautiful. They're great. And those are a part of building your thing of knowledge. But there are people who apostated, who studied Islam, who are graduates, and some that were sheikhs. Okay. And that's throughout history. It's just the way it is. So the guidance and the light is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we always ask Allah for guidance, for ikhlas with thabat, for sincerity and firmness on the sunnah. So the truth is not known by Harvard or Yale or wherever you graduated, or Jama Islamiyah. That's not the truth. There's so many mubtadi'ah that have also graduated from Jama Islamiyah, takfiris. Some who even went to kind of like a Sufi, Deobandi orientation, who studied in both institutes, and some, for a variety of reasons. I mean, just because you go through classes doesn't make you the end result and the end product. And I think you probably could, identify with that, inshallah ta'ala. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, accepts our good and forgive our evil, protect us from kulli su' wa makruh. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.